What's up, world? What's going on? It's your main man, the author. Right back at that ass again. Here's another one. What's going on, y'all? I just want to make this brief video. This video is going to be more about Miss T. For those of you who are not familiar with Miss T, I don't know a whole lot about her, but from what I understand, um, she's some type of drug heroin or dealer, and that was from Harlem back in the 80s, 80s and 90s. Um, even with some of these the American Gangster episodes on BET, they started showing mostly it was males, but then they started showing certain females. She's like one of the female traffickers or whatever. But more or less, it just seems like, if you look at her story, at first she wasn't a drug dealer. Doesn't seem like she was major with it. She was just peddling for other major drug dealers. But my point in this video is when she talks about her timeline, about her life, uh, she also talks about like how she had run-ins with various other large drug dealers or felons. Rich Porter being one, 50 Cent, the real 50 Cent, not the rapper, the robber. Um, but what listening to her story, what really grabbed my attention was the fact that when she talks about her timeline, when she was in Harlem during those days where drugs was everywhere, and in any major city across the country, they also had the heroin and crack epidemic primarily in the 80s. It was big in Harlem, but it wasn't just in Harlem. It was all over the country. From if your community had at least 25% black, quote unquote African American, then you had a poverty segment there, and that poverty segment more likely dealt in illegal activities like selling crack and things of that nature. It was in Watts, L.A., Chicago, even in my hometown, Rochester, New York, uh, Miami, Baltimore, D.C., all over the place. So she's from Harlem, and she talks about her timeline. But what really stood out was the fact that when she talked about her life, basically she talked about people who she was dating, and all she dated was drug dealers, man. I mean, even before she actually started peddling for these guys, um, and not to interrupt myself, but it amazes me how you can get a black female from the hood, you can get her support. If you ask for anything positive, like, okay, let me go ahead and try to set up a fruit stand, or let me try to set up, if you ask for something illegal, it is almost impossible to get the assistance of the black female. But if you want to get in some negative activity, she's right there to support you, bro. She supported all these drug dealers, B. And when she talks about her timeline, there's like an hour segment, YouTube video where she talks about her life, her timeline of her life, growing up in Harlem, and she mentions about 15 different drug dealers that she dated, and she dated a lot of people. Okay. And almost every boyfriend she had was a drug dealer. Now you can say, okay, yeah, she was young, but still, every drug dealer she had, every every guy she dated was a drug dealer. She even met Fritz. She says Fritz was a major supplier of drugs in the 80s. Some said he was the major connect for Rich Porter. Um, and she dated some guy that worked for him, that worked directly for Fritz, and almost every guy she dated was a drug dealer, man. And and when she now, I think she's like in her 50s, when she talks about those various stories, she says she looks upon those days with like they're one of the, that's some of the most fun she's ever had. Um, she even talked specifically about how she saw 50 Cent get murdered. The real 50 Cent, the one who was the thief. He robbed stores without a mask, and he robbed drug dealers. This is the guy that the rapper patterned himself after. That's why when the rapper 50 Cent, his claim to fame, or in the underground, his claim to fame was that song, How to Rob, or he was doing songs in the underground for quite some time. But the song How to Rob is kind of what catapulted him to the mainstream. And the reason why he made that song is because the real 50 Cent, he was a much smaller guy, but he robbed people. He robbed stores and drug dealers, from my understanding. And Miss T talked about when she saw the real 50 Cent being surrounded by a group of guys who were speaking with him, talking with him, right? And then all of a sudden, the guy pulls out a gun. 50 Cent starts running up the street. And according to her, 50 Cent, she saw 50 Cent running towards her because he was running away from those guys. And then she turned around and began to run too. And they were shooting in their direction. And she tried to go one way, 50 Cent went another way. And they both ended up taking fire. So some of the bullets hit her, and some of the bullets hit 50. 50's injuries were fatal. And she barely made it, right? And, she just goes into her interactions with various drug dealers and how they took care of her and things of that nature. And listening to the story, I'm just amazed. I'm like, that's really a lot of the females that I grew up with were just like her, man. They love drug dealers. They love to support drug dealers, helping them sell their merchandise when they were in jail, helping them make stops, helping them to supply customers when they were away supplying other customers. I mean, they fully supported these drug dealers, man. And it just amazed me, man. I mean, I grew up in New York State just like she did, but it was a different part of New York State. But Rochester had a big crack epidemic in the 80s as well. It's not as well known because it's at the top of the state. Actually, Rochester and Buffalo. And those cities don't get as much attention as New York City because they're in the corner of New York State, the western corner. And New York City is on pretty much the border of Connecticut and things of that nature. And New York City is pretty much where the U.S. keeps all its money, the stock market and things of that nature. NYSE, all that stuff. The IMF, World Bank, I think, is stationed there. So, anything in that area typically gets more attention. Easily, as there the boroughs, the way it's set up, all the boroughs are surrounded by water, so it's easy to get shipments in and shipments out of various quantities of drugs and other merchandise. But yeah, it just amazed me how these black and she still talks about how that was one of the best times of her life. And I am amazed to see how many black females, no matter where they're from in the U.S., if they're from the inner city, how they will support drug dealers, man. Doesn't matter, New York City, L.A., Florida. Doesn't matter, man. all around the country. They will support drug dealers and even put their lives on the line for them. They will support drug dealers, man. Uh, and that it's easier to understand why they procreate with them, why they have babies by them. And don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about people. There are people who peddle a little weed here and there just to pay the bills. If times are rough, they'll go ahead and peddle. I'm not justifying it, but if times are rough, they'll peddle a little something just to pay the bills. I do understand that. But these females love the most ruthless and hardcore dealers in the game. They love them, man. The most ruthless guys. Guys who'll cut you up, who'll kill you. I mean, big time drug dealers. They love those guys, man. And she was no different. And she spread herself around. She mentioned in her 1 hour series that's on this channel, she talked about at least 15 or 16 different guys that she had dated, okay, throughout her life. And the reason why I said dated, she was sleeping with all of them, and all dealers, man. They had most of those guys ended up either in jail or prison or they died somehow. They had a short life. But yeah, that just shows me how a lot of black women, and even all the Miss T's of the world, and now she has a book out. She talked about not to get sidetracked, but she has a book out now. I think she lives in Atlanta, and she has a book out that talks about her life in Harlem and things of that nature. And she talks about how Mace got chased out of Harlem and all that crap. But she ended up getting chased out of Harlem too. She had to relocate because at the before she left, they were going to kill her. But it just amazes me, man, how I can't keep reiterating how black females, and all the Miss T's of the world love these big time, ruthless drug dealers, man. And like I heard this one story, this guy, man, he was head of some gang, some black guerrilla family. And he was a prisoner, head of the guerrilla family, and he was sleeping with 4 black female correctional officers at the same time, man. He was dating all 4. I think they were all in the same prison, and he was fucking all 4 of them, man. They take him into the holding cell and be back there for like 2-3 hours, and then they come out. One was light skinned, one was kind of fat, she was decent, dark skinned, and then there was another one. He was banging all 4 of them. I think they got caught. They all lost their jobs. But 4 black female correction officers. He was fucking all 4 of them, man, and had all 4 of them bringing them shit. Making it easier for him to commit crimes. Because, when they go to prison, all they do is try to control the prison, right? So they bring drugs in there and alcohol and all that shit. And same thing that they was doing on the outside, right? And they had guards bring that shit in for them. Cigarettes, whatever, right? And he was fucking all 4 of these chicks, man. Man, getting laid more inside of prison than a lot of us are getting laid outside of prison. Head of the black guerrilla family, man. And like I was saying, a few of them chicks he was with didn't even look all that bad. A couple of them did look cute. That's a player. That's a player for real, man. That's some good action you getting, man. 4 chicks you banging and you locked up. You imagine the pussy he'd be getting if he was free? Holy shit. Banging all 4 of them chicks. He locked up. Life sentence, right? Still winning. They'll take him in that holding cell. He tearing their ass up, man. I think what happened was they started finding out about each other. I think some of them even knew about each other, but I think a few of them started falling in love because I think they knew they was all fucking the same dude. A lot of females try to act like they don't know. They know. All right. So they knew they was fucking the same dude, but what happens is I think one or two of them fell in love with the motherfucker and then got jealous of the other ones. And then that's when that conflict came into place. And that's when everybody's cover got blown. And then everybody ended up losing their jobs. Because one or two of them seriously started falling in love with this motherfucker. I mean, can you imagine that, man? These black females love thugs. And I understand. Power attracts. That's for all females. I get that. But for black females, it's just something else. It's not just the power, man. It is the allure of people doing. These guys are not just bad boys. Okay, these guys are criminal, cold-blooded killers, man. I grew up with some of these guys, some of their little brothers and stuff like that. I grew up with them, man. And they passed those same genes down to their little brothers, man. And cold, heartless people, man. Didn't give a fuck. Like, and that's nothing to be proud of. Because you're tearing the community apart, man. People who tried to stand up for their community were and said, okay, and these people aren't snitches. What I classify as a snitch is that if I'm in your organization, if I'm in the black gorilla family, okay, if I'm in the black gorilla family and I snitch on a leader, or I'm a lieutenant and I snitch on a leader or something like that, then I'm a snitch. If I say, okay, look, I'm going to the feds. I know that the feds are closing in on the black gorilla family. I'm a top lieutenant. The feds step to me and say, hey, look, well, you can cut yourself a deal and give up the head gorilla, or we're going to give you at least 15 years because we got enough on you. And I say, all right, man, I'll make a deal, right? That's a snitch. But if I'm a person that's not a part of that, I'm a everyday working class citizen, and I speak up against the black gorilla family because I see what their drugs and crack, them selling narcotics is tearing apart our community. And if I stand up, I'm not a snitch. Why? Because I'm not in that organization. I'm trying to save my community. I am a hero. But a lot of those guys who did stand up for their community were killed, man. Because the lawyers and judges make so much off of these drug dealers that they go ahead and they support them and provide them with the intel, which allows them to find out who's going to testify against them. So the police are and this is another video, but the police are very hypocritical when especially on the show Another 48, they're very hypocritical when they tell people to stop snitching when you know that people can't stand up because the police doesn't support them. They support the police. A lot of ways the police supports the major drug dealers and major traffickers. And that's how a lot of these guys get a chance to go in and out of prison a bunch of times before they finally get them. Because if my next door neighbor tried to testify, he got killed. The one across the street tried to testify, he got killed. The one on the other side of the street, he gets killed. Am I going to testify against the black gorilla family? No. Because my life will be in peril, will be in danger. And there's nobody to protect people who wants to stand up for their community. So that's why people are not saying anything, man. It's not because of Another 48 tries to act like, oh, we go door to door, but no one wants to give us any information because they all live by a no snitching policy. Even people who aren't involved, like some type of mafia. What's that? Italians have the La Merita or some bullshit, making it seem like that's the shit that the black community is on, that we are on. But that's bullshit. Because a lot of witnesses came forth in the 70s and 80s and 90s that tried to tell the police, like, hey, look, these motherfuckers are doing this and that, and they were killed, man. There are people trying to save their community, and some of them people, them witnesses, were killed in their own homes. So another 48, a lot of these cops are full of shit because they know that. And anytime you try to testify against some of these thugs, the police, there's no protection program for these guys. Okay, for them when they testify against these folks, and then even if it is, a lot of times they're not going to take your family, but it's no protection for these guys, and their lawyers tip them off and say, well, yeah, such and such is going to testify against you. Just like The Wire kind of showed that in the first season, how people who were witnessing were getting executed. So that's why a lot of people who are not involved in crime are terrified to say anything. That's why, in a lot of ways, the thugs have taken over the community. Not to get off on a tangent. So a lot of the allure of black women loving thugs is not all their fault, but when you see the connections that the thugs have, especially the leaders, then you feel protected. Because a lot of the lawyers and judges, I know the other side supports the thugs. You know, that the institution. So I get that part of it. However, okay, you can make it harder for the establishment to continue this vicious circle of creating these gangster thugs if the black woman would step back and say, hey, look, I'm not going to support that. Because it's a lot of brothers trying to do the right thing in these areas, but they won't support them. And a big reason why the black female is supporting the thugs is partly because of the power, but mostly it's because of the money and all the flash, and they can show off and shit like that. Even before you get to the power, they don't even care so much about the power of the black female. To tell you the truth, the black female, they don't want power over other groups of women. You know, they want to be looked at the way that the white woman is looked at by the white man. You know, they want that long hair and those long eyelashes and all that other shit. You know, and the drug dealer can keep them with their weaves and all that shit like that. And they tangled up in that shit. That's the main thing that keeps them attracted to the drug dealer. Because the drug dealer don't have to look handsome. He can look, it's been some rough guys. I mean, Preacher Heatley wasn't a Cinderella type, a prince in a knight in shining armor. He got plenty of chicks. All those guys it's a lot of Miss T's boyfriends didn't, you know, they're just regular guys, man. They wasn't like no Denzel Washington types, but they was knocking them dead out there. Why? Because they like the gold rings and all that shit, the chains and all that shit. Black females love that shit, man. They love those drug dealers. And now, a lot of times, too, now they're raising drug dealers. They had this one video where these 8-year-olds were at a strip club. Or actually, no, I think they weren't at a strip club. I'm sorry. The mom paid strippers to come to the house to entertain the 8-year-olds. 8, 9-year-old kids, man. She paid the stripper to come to the house and put on a strip show for her 8-year-old son. I mean, shit is getting crazy. So this stripper, prostitution, drug dealing has now become the primary culture, man. The surface of what we're about in the black community, and that's devastating, man. And it's not just, I guess, the rap music, but the black exploitation movies were really big and planting these seeds too in the minds of our people. But first things first, we have to take control of what we can take control of, and the black women are going to have to stop going to thugs. I'm not saying go to any nerd or any person who's a leper, or go to any person who you don't find attractive. No, but if all the people you find attractive are drug dealers and thieves and liars and hustlers and pimps, if that's all that you're attracted to, you have to start asking yourself some questions, man. That's real. If that's not some, if that's pretty much 99% of what you were attracted to as a female in the black community, you have to ask yourself some questions. And those guys, I mean, and I'm not telling females to be with guys that they're not attracted to, but those guys, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to have a long-term marriage with those type of guys. I.e., while a lot of black females are single. And they just get passed around. But didn't want to go too much into this video, man. Be sure to like, subscribe. Appreciate all the new subscribers out there. Hope you guys are taking care of yourself. Until next time, I'll see you on the other side.